Hello, welcome to this edition of Christian Employee Series. In this edition, I'll be talking to us about strategies for winning soul at work. Now, I know many of us are faced with challenges of how to win souls at work, and this is something that we must all overcome because we have a mandate to go out into the world and make disciples of all nations. So we cannot shy away from this responsibility that God has given us. Now, Apostle Paul also said it in 1 Corinthians 9:16. He says, "For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of, for necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel." So none of us has any excuse to say that we are not going to preach the gospel for whatever we might reckon with as challenges, because really God is going to be asking us what we have done with the resources, including the jobs that He has given us. So we need to get this implanted in us, that necessity is laid upon us to preach the gospel. We spend about 70% of our waking hours at work every day. Every day we are in the office or we are at work, and that makes it our mission field. So we cannot deny the fact that God deliberately planted us there to be able to reach several other people that we may not have been able to minister to in other places. And I'm also aware that many of us want to be careful so that we're not labeled at work as too religious or fanatical, or we also don't want to get into trouble with the organizations by being labeled as someone who is probably going against the policies of the organization. So in what way then can we carry out this task, this responsibility that God has given us, which we all know that at the end of our sojourn here on earth is going to ask us, how many souls we've won for Him? Because He said in John 15 verse 16 that we have not chosen Him, but He has chosen us that we might bear fruit and that our fruit might abide. So if there is anything at the end of our race here on earth that God will be asking us, it's what fruit that we have done for Him. So now the question is, how then, can we maximize this grace, this opportunity that God has given us in our places of work to be able to preach the gospel? So one such way, which I have used over time, is telling your faith story. Now, what is a faith story? It's a narrative of how God or a biblical principle became very real to you. It's more like a testimony about a time when something spiritual happened to you. It doesn't tell someone how to know God at that particular point in time, but it communicates that He is at work, making a meaningful difference in your life. It's a perfect way to communicate spiritual truth in an inviting form, especially at work. Now, it's important for us to know what these faith stories are and a few guidelines on how to tell your faith story. Now, the first thing we need to bear in mind is that your faith story should be a natural part of the conversation that you're having with a colleague. It's not like you call someone aside and say, "You know what, I want to tell you my faith story." No. Just imagine you having a conversation related to work, or somebody has come to you telling you about what they might be going through, either with their supervisor or some projects they're working on and all that. And through that conversation, you find a faith story that is relevant to that. Then you bring it in, right? And in the course of that, you are solemnly, talking about Jesus Christ. Okay, another thing we need to know about telling our faith story is that faith stories are not faith sermons. They are stories. So they should not normally, take long, maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes. Okay, depending on the faith story that you are telling, but make sure that it does not, take long. And number 3 is that the subject of your faith story should be limited to God or to the Bible or maybe to a prayer. You should avoid making your faith story about a church, about a denomination or a religious leader, so as to avoid the risk of being identified with a person or group that may cause a barrier for the person. Imagine if there is a story about a particular denomination, about a particular man of God. That story, which may not go well, and the society, may influence this faith story that you are telling. So avoid making your faith story about a denomination, about a church, or about an individual. Make God and only God the focus. All right. Let me just give an example of how I have used this method. So I've listened to people come to me in some other times that whenever there is trouble at work, that I'm always calm. I'm not like running up and down like every other person, worried, and all that. So I've found a way of making this an opportunity to tell my story. So what I normally do is I tell people how God has shown himself strong in my life, all right, which has made me come to a point where I trust him totally. So for example, I've told stories like, okay, before I graduated from the university, I told God that I do not want to wait at home after graduation to get a job, and that I do not want any man to take the glory for this. God answered the prayer. I got an offer before the end of my service here, and no man could take glory for that, because the way it just came, it could only be God. So I have noticed this as a trend in my life. For example, in September 2007, I got tired of the job that I was doing in a bank, and I prayed to God that I needed a change of job by December of that same year. God worked things out, in his own way, and by the 31st of December of that same 2007, I resigned from the job I was working, and by January, I resumed in another organization. Again, at this point, no man could take glory for it, not even myself. In February, I was working in a bank, and the work had become more administrative. It wasn't challenging anymore, and I was asking myself, what am I doing here? So I prayed to God to sort me out by June of that same year, as I wanted, another chance, another opportunity. I wanted something that is more challenging. To God be the glory. On the 29th of May, I got a call from a senior friend, and he asked me to see him. And when I went to meet with him, he was offering me a job. I did not discuss with him before then. So again, in this case, God alone took all the glory. In 2017, I had a similar experience. I needed a job, and I prayed to God about it. By the morning of a particular day, I remember clearly it was a Monday morning, I was even praying. That time, around 7:46 a.m., I got a call. And because the call was coming consistently, I now had to check who was calling me. And I realized that he was an old friend, a senior colleague I had worked with before. And so he told me that he wanted us to see. We arranged a meeting, and I went to see him. In that meeting, he was offering me a job. And so, with all these trends, I've come to realize that God loves me. I've come to realize that God has my career in his heart. And so I'm not troubled by anything. Once I commit it into his hands, I know that he will work things out for me. And so that explains why I am always calm. So this has been a story that I've told to people, and it has generated interest. It has generated questions that they want to know more. How do you know that you prayed and God answered? How do you know it wasn't a coincidence? And all those questions that people ask. And these have afforded me the opportunity to now begin to explain things to them. And in the course of doing that, I have the opportunity to preach Jesus Christ. So that's how I've been able to tell my faith story. And in the course of doing that, started a conversation that led to preaching Jesus Christ. So you should ask yourself, what are the faith stories that you have? Okay. In the next video, in the next edition, I will be telling us about how we can identify our faith stories and how well we can use them. Till then, God bless you.